Welcome to Conflict Uncovered. It's Thursday, July 25th, late in the afternoon, here in Israel. We recorded a podcast earlier this week. There were some technical glitches, so it's been taken down. Those who downloaded it were able to hear it. Glad you could. This is going to replace it a bit and bring us a little bit more up to date. As I'm recording, over the past 10 minutes or so, there have been extensive drone attacks by Hezbollah in the Western Galilee. From here, we can hear some of the interceptions in the distance, but it's not close enough for me to have to go into a safe room, so I'll stay here and keep recording. Going around the clock, basically, from the south to the north, the Houthis in Yemen continue to be an issue. This past Saturday, late in the afternoon, the Israeli Air Force responded to the lethal drone strike that the Houthis launched against Tel Aviv earlier in that week and caused massive damage to the Houthi port in Yemen. It was not a symbolic strike, and I think very important for us to understand the difference what the United States and Britain and others have been doing in the Red Sea and outside of the Straits of Bab el-Mandeb against the Houthi threat to global maritime commerce has been more symbolic than effective, taking out a radar base here and a launcher there and an occasional drone in an attempt, apparently, to send a message to the Houthis to tell them, we're not happy with what you're doing, please stop. The Houthis are not getting the memo, and they're continuing their strikes. They had launched well over 200 strikes against Israel up until this past week, almost all of them at Eilat. Some landed, most were intercepted by Israel, some by the United States over the Red Sea. But the lethal strike in Tel Aviv, not far from the American consulate, the former embassy, brought a significant response by Israel, a major Israeli Air Force strike that shut down the port for a while, destroyed oil refinery capabilities, gasoline storage centers, which burned and ignited other fires well into the middle of the week. The Houthis responded by firing a single ballistic missile that was intercepted, but the quiet that we've had this week has been more a consequence of the Houthis being busy dealing with the burning port and its consequences, and not that they are in some way deterred by the Israeli strike. As a matter of fact, today they announced that they're going to step up their attacks against Israel, that they are not deterred, and we're going to be moving into, I think, a larger scale confrontation with them. And if Israel stays true to form, further strikes against the Houthis in Yemen are going to be even more devastating than the ones up until now, or the one up until now this past Saturday. But time will tell. It's important also for us to realize that the Houthis, the attack on Tel Aviv was part of a much larger attack of a ballistic missile and a number of other drones. The reports are 4 drones in total. The missile and the drones were intercepted. The 4th drone, the one actually hit Tel Aviv, was picked up by the Israeli air defense system, and because of human error, was not intercepted. And this is an important point because, as terrible as it was and tragic that there was lethality and people were injured and there was damage done, it's much better that it was the result of a human error than if somehow the drone had gotten past the Israeli system entirely. Human errors can be corrected. They happen. They shouldn't happen, but they're part of the reality. In Gaza, the operation in Rafah is winding down. The last Hamas battalion in Tel Sultan, one of the neighbors in Rafah, is being finally degraded. The 3 battalions that Hamas had in Rafah are now being reduced to less than 1, and hopefully in the next days will be reduced to none. And we'll see a withdrawal of Israeli forces from the city of Rafah, with the likelihood that we'll be going back in there in another month or 2 or 3 or whatever. And on that note, earlier this week, an operation was launched into Khan Yunis, which we evacuated a few months ago after defeating the battalions there. And that operation is ongoing. Dozens of terrorists have reportedly been killed, more infrastructure destroyed, tunnels have been uncovered and destroyed, and most importantly, over the past couple of days, with detailed and precise intelligence gained by military intelligence and, more importantly, the Shabak, the Israeli General Security Services, which is responsible for interrogating prisoners. And interrogating those prisoners is critically important for those who think that we shouldn't be taking them and we should simply be killing all the terrorists. Prisoners are the gift that keeps on giving. And with proper interrogation, and the Shabak knows how to properly interrogate, a great deal of real-time and important intelligence information is gained from them. In this case, the intelligence of the location of 5 bodies of hostages that were taken, or bodies that were snatched on October 7th and were hidden in one of the tunnels that was found. The engineering corps and its elite unit Yahalom spent 12 hours digging to get to where those bodies were and to return them. They were brought back to Israel, identified, and they're in the news now. 5 of those who were listed as hostages are not hostages, and their bodies returned. I'm going to take a moment to digress because there's a point that's very often missed in the discussion of Hamas. We all know that they're murderers, they're terrorists, they're rapists, they're kidnappers. But we often skip the fact that they're also body snatchers. In other words, not only do they hold on to the bodies of those they kill, the hostages who have been killed by them as hostages in Gaza, but they have also taken the bodies of people they killed in Israel and actually took those bodies into Gaza to hold as bargaining chips, knowing that Israel is committed and responsible to bring all of its people home, dead or alive. And the ghoulish, horrific behavior of Hamas, in addition to all of those others that we've talked about and that I mentioned, murder, rape, kidnapping, body snatching needs to be added and repeated to give an idea of how horrific and how terrible this organization really is. In Judea Samaria, the West Bank, there's an ongoing operation. We took out a number of terrorists this week in Tulkarem, which is the West Bank city nearest Netanya. It's only about 7 miles from the entrance to Netanya across the security barrier, in an operation that drew out 5 terrorists, leaders in the city of Tulkarem, and they were eliminated by a drone. 2 things are important about this operation. One is that it was not simply a target of opportunity. Very often we will take out terrorist leaders, as we did most likely, which still haven't confirmed at 100%, Mohammed Def, the head of the military wing, meaning the operational wing of Hamas, a couple of weeks ago, knowing where he would be and waiting essentially in ambush, an ambush in the sky, until he showed up and was taken out. In this case, they were drawn out by a ruse. They're not reporting what it is, but they were drawn out into the open, and this was an Israeli military security services initiative to bring them out and to eliminate them, and it was done successfully. Another very important point in that operation is that 2 of the people, the terrorists who were killed, one was the Hamas commander of Tulkarem, and the other was the commander of the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade in Tulkarem. Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade is a branch of Fatah. The leader of Fatah is Mahmoud Abbas. Abu Mazen was also the leader of the Palestinian Authority and the leader of the PLO. He wears a number of different hats, or keffiyehs, if you will. And it points out that the idea that Hamas bad, Fatah good, Hamas terrorist, Fatah are partners for peace, and Abu Mazen as the great Western hope of the day after and being able to bring peace, stability, and tranquility and a two-state solution to the Middle East, might raise a few questions that one of his leading officers is operating in conjunction and cahoots with a leading Hamas officer in Tulkarem. Makes you kind of wonder whose side who is on. And of course, while all of this was going on in Beijing, the Chinese announced an agreement among all the Palestinian factions, including Hamas and Fatah, to set up a national unity government to be able to rule together both over the West Bank and Gaza. Now, the big winner of this, of course, is China. They're trying to get a foothold in the Middle East, and this is a good way for them to do it. And I wouldn't put too much long-term confidence in this kind of an arrangement. It's not the first time that Hamas, Fatah, and friends have signed agreements to live happily ever after, and they violated them rather quickly. But rather, what we're seeing is a mutual attempt to try to stay relevant and stay out of each other's hair. Hamas, badly beaten up in Gaza and continuing to be beaten up by the IDF, would like very much to have the support of Fatah and the Palestinian Authority to at least be a player in Gaza once Israel withdraws from there. So that's their side of it. The PA and Fatah know very well that Hamas is extremely strong in the West Bank, much stronger than is being reported in the Western media. The media has kind of divided the territories between Hamas rules Gaza and Fatah rules the West Bank. That's simply not true. Hamas ruled Gaza until we basically threw them out, and hopefully we'll keep them out and destroy them adequately so they don't come back. But Fatah does not rule the West Bank. Many of the cities in the West Bank are very much in Hamas' hands, working somewhat alongside Fatah, but they've done that before. And this agreement in Beijing is very possibly, and I would say even most likely, an attempt by Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen, and Fatah to prevent in the West Bank what happened in Gaza in 2007 when Hamas, after winning the elections and Fatah refusing to hand over power, Hamas went in and threw them out physically in a violent overthrow. They killed over 600 Fatah members. Fatah survivors fled and surrendered to Israel in the hope that the IDF would not massacre them, and it didn't, the way Hamas did. So this is very much an attempt on both sides to try to keep each one in some semblance of survival rather than power at this point. And we'll see how long it lasts. In the meantime, it's something in place, but worth keeping in mind that the rivalry there is real, but it's not quite as sheer and absolute as the press would like you to believe. Last but not least, along the northern border, as I mentioned, drone strikes over the past hour, some rocket attacks. This is an ongoing story. Slow escalation, qualitative escalation on the part of Hezbollah, where attacks, rocket and drones, are being launched at towns, villages, kibbutzim, moshavim, that are not evacuated. Up until a couple of weeks ago, almost exclusively, not entirely, but almost exclusively, their heavy attacks have been against evacuated villages. Now they are firing into areas where there is an Israeli population. This greatly increases the likelihood of casualties and increases the likelihood of what I refer to as the nursery school scenario, which is the possibility of a group of children, whether in school or in camp or in a playground, will be killed and injured by a missile, which will completely change the rules of the game on the ground at the moment. 3 schools have been hit in the past week, all in evacuated areas, schools meaning preschool and school structures. There was nobody there, there were no injuries, but if that happens in an area where there are children, all bets are off, and I would estimate that Israel and Hezbollah will be in a full-scale shooting war, as opposed to the half-scale shooting war that it's in right now, almost instantaneously. I'm not dealing with Iran. I'm not dealing with Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu's visit to the United States. Today he's supposed to be meeting with President Biden and Vice President Harris. Tomorrow with former President Trump. So I'm going to hold all of that off until next week when I can address it all as a combined issue, including his speech and the responses and so on. So with that, signing off for now. Stay safe and see you next time.